The forest was quiet that morning, too quiet for the old veteran's liking. He'd walked those trails for years, but that day, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Beside him, his loyal K9 partner Max stopped mid-stride. Ears up, body tense. The kind of stillness that only men who've seen war truly understand. Then came the bark, one sharp, echoing cry that sliced through the silence. The veteran followed Max's gaze and froze. There, hidden between the trees, stood a small black cabin. No windows, no smoke, no sound. A place that shouldn't exist. Max's growl deepened, his eyes locked on the door. He barked again, louder, desperate, as if trying to keep something inside from escaping. The man raised his flashlight, the beam trembling in his hand. "Be calm, my boy," he whispered, but Max kept barking louder. And then it happened. A faint, broken cry from within. A child's voice. What they found beyond that door would unravel a secret buried in silence and change their lives forever. Stay till the end, because what happened next will haunt you in the best way. Before we begin, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. And truly, I'm wondering, where are you watching from? I'd love to know how far our stories reach. The morning began like any other, cold, pale, and quiet enough for a man to hear his own heartbeat. The veteran walked the trail behind his cabin, the cane steady in his hand, and his dog Max trotted close beside him. They came here every day. Same path, same silence. Only today, that silence felt wrong. Heavy, like the forest was holding its breath. A sharp wind rustled through the trees, carrying the smell of frost and something faintly metallic. Max stopped first. His body stiffened, ears forward, eyes burning toward the tree line. The veteran frowned. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, but the dog didn't move. Then came the bark, one, then another, deep, cutting through the quiet like a gunshot. The man's pulse jumped. Max had barked before, but not like this. Not with that low tremor of fear. He followed the dog's stare and saw it through the haze of morning light. A small black cabin crouched between the trees, half sunk into the ground. No windows, no path leading to it. It looked old, abandoned, but something about it didn't belong. He'd lived near these woods for years and had never seen that building before. Max growled low, hackles rising. His paws dug into the frozen soil as he strained forward, tail rigid, muscles quivering. The veteran hesitated, instinct whispering, "Don't go closer." But Max barked again, louder this time, almost frantic. The sound echoed through the trees, startling a few crows from the branches. They scattered, black wings flashing like shreds of smoke. "Easy now," he said softly, though his voice trembled. Max didn't ease. The growl deepened until it was almost a rumble from the earth itself. The veteran lifted his flashlight, sweeping it across the clearing. The beam hit the cabin's wall, old wood darkened not by time, but by something wet and thick seeping through the cracks. His gut tightened. He took a step forward. The ground under his boot felt soft, spongy. A faint odor rose, iron, rot, something too familiar to mistake. Max barked again, sharp and desperate. And then, from inside the cabin, came a sound that froze the air. A thin, human cry. Faint. Broken. Terrified. The man froze, breath caught halfway between disbelief and dread. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, though there was no one to answer but the trembling animal at his side. Max whined, pawing the earth, body pulled toward the cabin like a compass finding its true north. The veteran's fingers tightened on the cane. For a moment, he wanted to turn back, call for help, pretend he hadn't heard. But the cry came again, weaker this time, muffled by wood and earth. Something inside him, the part that had survived war but never escaped it, snapped awake. He stepped closer, eyes fixed on the door. The wood was blackened, warped, but not rotten. Recent. He pressed his hand against it. It was cold, slick with condensation. Max circled once, barking again, the sound rising with panic. "Quiet," he whispered, but it came out as a plea. The dog stilled, tail low, chest heaving. The forest was utterly silent again. No birds, no wind, nothing but the soft creak of the door under his palm. He could feel his heart beating in his fingertips. Then the door moved. Just a fraction. A breath of air, cold and foul, escaped the gap. He recoiled. Max snarled, the fur along his spine standing like wire. For an instant, the veteran thought he heard movement inside. A shuffle, a whimper, then silence. He looked around. No trail, no smoke, no footprints. The cabin sat there like it had grown from the dirt, waiting for someone foolish enough to notice. He lifted his flashlight again, the beam trembling across the frame. And then, beneath the wooden sill, he saw something that made his stomach twist. A handprint, small and pale, pressed into the damp wood. The veteran's throat went dry. His breath clouded in front of him, slow and shallow. Max whimpered softly, eyes darting from him to the door. The man lowered himself slightly, reaching out, fingers brushing over that mark. It wasn't old. The skin oils still gleamed under the light. "Someone's in there," he whispered, barely breathing the words. Max barked again, louder this time, pressing forward, pawing against the door. The wood groaned beneath the weight, and for a heartbeat the veteran thought it might give way. Then another sound rose from inside, clearer now. It wasn't just crying, it was words. Weak, slurred, gasping. "Help! Please!" He stumbled back a step, a flashlight shaking in his grip. Max turned his head toward him, eyes wide, waiting. The veteran swallowed, trying to steady his voice. "All right," he said hoarsely. "We're going in." But before he could move, the forest shifted again, the kind of movement you don't hear but feel. The temperature dropped, and from the pines above, a single crow screamed and fled. Max's body tensed. His gaze snapped to the left, toward the trees. The veteran followed, but there was nothing there, only the whisper of wind through the needles. He turned back toward the cabin and froze. The door was now slightly open, just enough to reveal darkness beyond. No movement, no sound, just that black void waiting. For a long breath, neither man nor dog moved. Then Max barked once more, the sound echoing like a warning and a promise all at once. The veteran stepped forward, and the silence of the forest broke beneath their feet. The air shifted the moment he stepped toward the threshold. The forest's breath lingered behind him, cold, watchful, while the scent from inside the cabin crawled out like a memory that had waited too long to be found. Metal. Damp wood. And beneath it all, something darker, sharp enough to cut through reason. Max pressed his nose to the door's edge, nostrils flaring. A single growl rose from his chest, low and steady. The veteran's fingers brushed the handle. The hinges moaned in protest as the door opened wider. Light sliced through the dark like a blade. Dust swirled in slow motion, catching on the beam of the flashlight. The cabin's interior was a portrait of ruin. Broken furniture, splintered wood, glass shards glinting faintly beneath layers of grime. A table lay overturned, its legs twisted. one edge smeared with something dark that had long since dried. Max stepped inside first, head low, tail stiff, paws silent but sure. The man followed, the floor creaking beneath his boots, every sound amplified in the hollow stillness. The deeper he went, the more it felt like walking into a secret that didn't want to be seen. A child's drawing hung crooked on the wall, a sun, a stick figure family, a dog. But the lines were jagged, smeared, the colors faded into brown-red stains that no crayon could make. He stared at it too long. Memory and reality began to blur, old battlefield images bleeding into this quiet room of ghosts. Beneath the table, something small caught the light. He knelt slowly, reaching under the splintered wood. His fingers brushed worn leather, a shoe, child-sized, torn along the seam. He lifted it gently, holding it like something sacred. It was cold, far too cold. His breath fogged as he whispered into the emptiness, "Who were you, kid?" The words vanished into the air, unanswered. Max paced restlessly, his claws tapping the floorboards, his nose pressed to the ground, tracing invisible lines across the wood. The veteran's flashlight followed him, left, right, then still. The dog stopped at the center of the room, body rigid, gaze locked on a rug near the far corner. One edge of it bulged, uneven, as if the floor itself had begun to breathe. The veteran crouched beside him. "You smell it too, don't you?" he muttered. His hand found the rug's corner. It was heavy, stiff with age, the fabric damp and cold. He hesitated. The forest outside was silent, utterly, unnaturally silent. Even the wind had died. With a slow, deliberate motion, he peeled it back. Beneath it lay a metal latch, dull and gray, embedded into the floorboards like a wound. The ring handle was slick with condensation, a faint glimmer of frost tracing its edge. Max whined softly, ears back, his body caught between curiosity and fear. The man stared at it, pulse thudding in his throat. His mind said, "Stop. Wait for backup. Get out." But logic had always been too slow to save lives. He pressed his palm to the latch. It was cold, colder than the air, colder than steel should be. The kind of cold that felt alive. He looked at Max. The dog met his gaze, eyes wide, pleading. For a second, he saw the same look he'd once seen in the desert. A comrade before the blast, silently asking if they were doing the right thing. He took a breath that felt too heavy for his lungs. "Easy, boy," he whispered, though his voice carried more to himself than to Max. The cabin seemed to listen. Every creak of the floor, every groan of the wind outside echoed back like an answer. He reached for his radio, thumb pressing the switch. Static, only static. He sighed, the sound small, swallowed by the room. No one was coming. It was just him and the dog. Again, like always. He wrapped his fingers around the latch. The metal bit into his glove, slick beneath his touch. He hesitated once more, eyes narrowing, muscles tensing as if preparing for recoil. Max moved closer, pressing his shoulder against the man's leg. That simple weight grounded him, reminded him that fear didn't mean retreat. It only meant something still mattered. The veteran lifted. The hinge screamed, a sound that wasn't loud, but felt loud, vibrating through the wood, through his bones, through memory itself. For an instant, nothing happened. Then came the rush of air, cold, heavy, rising from below like the breath of something buried alive. It hit him in the chest first, that smell. Rust, earth, and beneath it, despair. Not the kind you imagine, but the kind that lingers long after screams fade. He froze, unable to move, flashlight trembling in his grasp. The beam wavered over the opening, revealing only blackness, a void that seemed to swallow light whole. Max let out a sound he'd never made before, half growl, half whimper. The man glanced down, hand instinctively finding the dog's head. "We're not supposed to be here," he whispered, but his feet were already shifting closer. The air rising from the trapdoor brushed against his face, cold enough to sting. It wasn't fear he felt first. It was recognition. That same chill he'd felt years ago, standing before something he couldn't unsee. The cold deepened, the silence thickened, and somewhere beneath that floor, something exhaled back. The first step down felt like crossing into another world. The air grew heavier with each descent, thick and metallic, clinging to his throat like the memory of old wounds. The flashlight trembled in his hand, its beam slicing through dust and shadow, illuminating fragments of a place no one should ever have built. The stairs groaned under his weight, their wood soft with rot, sighing like tired bones. Max followed close behind, silent but trembling, his breath visible in the rising chill. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became, until even the forest above felt like a different life. The beam of light finally reached the bottom, revealing a floor of packed dirt and walls of raw concrete sweating with moisture. The smell was stronger here, rust, mold, and something faintly human. The man's pulse quickened as the light caught on metal. Rows of cages, their bars orange with corrosion, chains dangling from hooks in the ceiling like the ribs of forgotten beasts. A table stood in the corner, its surface scattered with tools that didn't belong in any home. Saws, pliers, syringes, duct tape, each piece placed with an order that felt too deliberate to be random. He whispered to himself, "This wasn't a cabin." The words barely escaped his lips, swallowed by the darkness. "It's a cellar. A cellar built for secrets." His flashlight moved again, tracing the outline of each cage, each chain. The silence pressed closer, almost physical, wrapping around them both. Max's paw shifted against the dirt. The dog's body stiffened, ears erect, muscles drawn taut. Then, without warning, he barked once, sharp, urgent, the sound slicing through the dark like a command. The veteran turned. "What is it?" But Max had already moved, a blur of motion into the corner where the light barely reached. The beam followed, quivering over the ground, catching the edge of a torn blanket draped over something small. For a moment, neither of them moved. The blanket stirred. A muffled sound, soft and broken, rose from beneath it, the faint whimper of something alive. He knelt, heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "It's all right." His fingers brushed the edge of the fabric, rough and damp. With slow care, he lifted it back. Beneath the folds lay a child, thin, pale, curled into himself like a shadow. His hair was dark, tangled with dirt, and his face was streaked with grime. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old. One sleeve of his torn gray shirt hung loose, empty. The other arm, the only one, was wrapped in a dirty strip of cloth. The boy flinched as the light touched his face, instinctively turning away, lips trembling. His voice came out cracked, barely more than breath. Don't let him come back." The words fell apart on his tongue, as if even speaking them risked summoning something. The veteran felt his throat close, his chest tightening with a wave of recognition. Not of the boy, but of the fear in his eyes. It was the same kind he'd seen in mirrors after too many nights without sleep. He holstered his weapon and reached out, careful not to startle him. "You're safe now, son," he whispered, the words trembling with more hope than certainty. Max inched closer, his head low, tail still, eyes gentle. He gave a soft whine, a sound that somehow felt human. The boy's gaze shifted toward him, hesitant, uncertain. Then something in him loosened. His fingers brushed the dog's fur, weak and tentative. Max stayed perfectly still. For a brief moment, time stopped. The air around them softened, but then Max's ears flicked. Once, twice, his body tightening again. The veteran froze. He knew that change, that sudden, silent alert. Somewhere above them, wood creaked. A slow, deliberate sound. Not the cabin settling, not the wind. Someone was walking overhead. He turned off the flashlight instinctively, plunging them into half-darkness. The boy whimpered softly, clutching Max's fur. "Shh," the man breathed, listening. Another step, then another. The boards groaned with weight, directly above the trapdoor. Whoever it was, they were moving slowly, listening, maybe hunting. He looked at Max. The dog's teeth glinted faintly in the dark, his growl deep and low. The veteran's pulse surged. He wrapped an arm around the boy, pulling him close. "Hold on," he whispered. The child buried his face against his chest. The man's muscles screamed with tension as he lifted the boy, every movement careful, silent, precise. The climb to the stairs felt endless. Each step up the dirt floor sent vibrations through the wood. The flashlight remained off. He relied on touch and instinct, the soldier in him moving by sound, by breath, by memory. Max followed close, pausing at the foot of the staircase, his eyes fixed upward. Another creak echoed from above, then a second, the rhythm of someone waiting. When the man reached the first step, the boy shivered violently. "Please," he whispered, voice cracking. "He's coming back." The veteran's grip tightened. He could feel the child's heartbeat against his chest, quick and shallow. He looked toward the ceiling where faint lines of light seeped through the cracks between boards. Dust drifted down like falling ash. Max's growl deepened, a sound that didn't ask for permission but warned of what was coming. He took one more step, then another. And then, before he could reach the top, it happened. A thunderous slam that shook the air. The trapdoor above crashed shut, sealing them in darkness so absolute it felt alive. The flashlight flickered once in his hand, then died completely. The boy cried out, muffled and terrified. Max barked, teeth flashing in the dark, the echo bouncing against concrete walls. The veteran's heart pounded like a drum inside his chest. The air turned heavy, stale, suffocating. He looked up at where the faint light had been, now swallowed whole. Whoever was up there, whatever had found them, had closed the world off above. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Only breath. Only fear. Then came the quietest sound of all, a whisper of footsteps retreating across the floorboards, slow, measured, deliberate. And in the darkness below, 3 living hearts waited. 1 man, 1 child, 1 dog, bound by silence, surrounded by secrets that refused to stay buried. The door didn't open easily. Its swollen wood fought back until one final strike from the veteran's shoulder sent it bursting outward. Cold air rushed in, carrying the breath of dawn mixed with fog and pine. For a heartbeat, it felt like freedom, until he saw the figure standing at the edge of the clearing. A man. Tall, lean, wearing a hooded jacket streaked with mud. His boots were planted in the wet earth, and in his hands he held a shovel that caught what little light the morning offered. The soil on his gloves was fresh, damp. He looked as though he'd been digging graves. Max froze beside the veteran, his fur bristling, his growl low and steady. The man tilted his head, studying them. The boy cradled in one arm, the dog at his side. Then came that smile. Thin. Wrong. The kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. His voice was soft, but carried easily through the mist. You shouldn't have come here. The words weren't a threat. They were a verdict. The veteran stepped forward, placing the boy gently behind him. His breath formed clouds in the fog. "Who are you?" he called, his weapon steady though his pulse thundered in his ears. The stranger didn't answer. His gaze slid past them, toward the cabin behind, toward the ground beneath it, and something in that brief flicker of movement sent a cold shiver through the air. Max barked, sharp and urgent, body coiled like a spring. The man's smile didn't waver. He simply let out a long breath, almost a sigh, and dropped something metallic at his feet. A hiss followed. Then a burst of white smoke exploded outward, swallowing the clearing in chaos. The world vanished. The veteran's lungs burned. He coughed, pulling the boy close, eyes stinging. The fog turned to choking gray. Shapes flickered, trees, shadows, ghosts. Then a dark blur lunged through the smoke. Shovel raised high. He barely had time to lift his arm before Max was there, a blur of fur and fury. The dog struck first, jaws clamping onto the man's forearm. The sound was primal, flesh, metal, rage. The shovel dropped with a clang, vanishing into the mist. The man's scream tore through the fog, wild and inhuman. The veteran stumbled forward, grabbing the boy's shoulder, dragging him back toward a fallen log for cover. Through the smoke, figures moved. One struggling, one standing guard. He could hear Max growling, the heavy thud of bodies colliding, the wet sound of impact. Then, silence again, except for breathing, ragged and uneven. The mist began to thin, carried off by the breeze that whispered through the trees. When the gray curtain lifted, the man lay on the ground, his hood half torn, face streaked with blood and dirt. He was younger than expected, mid-30s maybe, but his eyes were old, hollowed by something darker than years. Max stood over him, chest heaving, muzzle stained red. The veteran approached slowly, weapon raised, the boy clutching his sleeve. The man began to laugh. Not the laughter of madness or triumph. Something between both, sharp and broken. "You think it's over?" he rasped, coughing through blood. "He's not the only one." His hand twitched toward the tree line as if gesturing toward something unseen. The veteran didn't speak. He simply looked down at him, at the dirt beneath the man's nails, the gleam of the shovel, the strange calm behind that dying grin, and knew this wasn't random. There was a pattern, a purpose. Somewhere nearby, more were waiting. Max stepped between them, teeth bared again, ears forward. The boy pressed closer, trembling, small fingers clutching the man's jacket. "Don't let him come back," the child whispered, voice thin as the wind. The veteran crouched slightly, his gaze scanning the fog that lingered low to the ground. The forest was holding its breath again. Then came a sound, faint at first, like branches shifting. He turned. Two shapes emerged from the tree line, one tall, one shorter, both cloaked in the same gray mist. Metal glinted in their hands. Long, curved, silent. He exhaled slowly, lowering the boy behind him once more. "Stay close," he murmured. Max growled deep, a sound that rumbled from the ground itself. The fog thickened again as the two silhouettes stepped into the clearing, faces hidden, blades catching the morning light. And in that suspended heartbeat between silence and violence, the forest watched, as if the trees themselves remembered every sin buried beneath their roots. The first blade came from the fog, whistling past his ear. The veteran ducked, turned, and fired. The sound cracked through the still air, echoing against the trees. One of the men staggered back, collapsing into the wet leaves, his weapon tumbling from his hand. The second rushed forward, but Max was faster, a blur of muscle and fury, teeth sinking deep into the man's coat, dragging him to the ground. The fight was short, brutal, and wordless except for the growl of the dog and the pounding of hearts. Instinct had taken over, the kind that came from years of training, from dust and fire and memories he never wanted to revisit. The veteran moved like he once did in another life. Steady, deliberate, no hesitation. When the struggle ended, the clearing was still again, the fog thinning to reveal the cost of survival. One man lay motionless. Another fled limping into the pine shadows, vanishing between the trunks. His voice echoed back through the forest, hoarse, frantic, carried by the wind. "You opened the wrong door, old man. There are more." Then only silence. The veteran stood in the middle of it all, his chest heaving, the boy clinging to his leg. Max pacing between them like a sentinel carved from the night. The air smelled of gunpowder, soil, and iron. The quiet that followed was deeper than before, the kind that makes the heart forget to beat. He knelt slowly, pressing a trembling hand against Max's head. "Easy, partner," he whispered. "It's over now." But the truth was, it wasn't. Not yet. Hours later, the forest broke its silence again. Not with screams, but with sirens. Red and blue lights flickered through the fog, chasing away the shadows. Voices shouted orders. Boots thudded across the clearing. Someone took the boy from his arms, wrapping him in a blanket too large for his small frame. The veteran sat back against a tree, feeling the weight of everything he'd seen pressing against his chest. Max lay beside him, exhausted, head resting on his boot, eyes half closed, yet still alert. Detectives moved in and out of the cabin, their flashlights darting like insects. A woman in uniform, her badge gleaming wet under the drizzle, approached him. "Sir, you're safe now. We'll take it from here." He nodded, but didn't speak. His gaze was fixed on the open trapdoor, still gaping in the ground like an old wound that refused to close. From inside came murmurs, low and horrified. Boxes, files, photographs, names scrawled in ink on worn paper. One officer lifted a folder, his hand shaking. "Sir," he called out, "you'd better see this." Inside were lists, towns, dates, faces of children who had vanished without trace. It wasn't one cabin, it was part of something larger. A network built on silence and fear. The veteran's jaw tightened. He felt the chill seep deeper into his bones. The boy sat near the ambulance now, wrapped in wool and watched over by an EMT. His eyes, distant, his small body trembling under the weight of memory. Yet when Max walked over and sat before him, the boy lifted his good hand and touched the dog's fur, a faint, fragile smile breaking through the pain. That moment, that small, defiant flicker of life, was enough to remind the veteran that amidst horror, hope still existed. Because one boy survived. Because one dog had refused to stop barking. He walked over quietly, resting a hand on Max's back. "You found him," he whispered, voice low and steady. "You did that, partner." The German shepherd turned his head, eyes reflecting the floodlights, tail thumping weakly once against the ground. For a moment, it almost felt like peace. The scene unfolded around them. Officers marking evidence, generators humming, the fog thinning into mist. The smell of pine mixed with the sharp sting of disinfectant. The veteran stood near the ambulance as the boy drifted into uneasy sleep, the blanket rising and falling with each breath. When the last of the police cars pulled away and the forest returned to its muted hum, he stayed. The floodlights painted the cabin in pale silver, casting long shadows across the clearing. He stared at the trapdoor again, the mouth of the earth that had swallowed so many voices, and felt something stir beneath the hum of machines. A sound, soft, almost imagined. 3 knocks, slow, hollow, from beneath the ground. The veteran froze. Max's ears perked. The forest, once again, held its breath. Morning came quietly, as if the world itself was tired of noise. The storm had passed. The fog had lifted, and for the first time in weeks, the sky above the pines shone clear. Inside a small hospital room overlooking that forest, the veteran sat in a chair too small for his frame, hands folded, eyes fixed on the bed before him. Sunlight drifted across white sheets and soft monitors that beeped like a heartbeat returning home. At the foot of the bed lay Max, his fur brushed clean, the bandage on his flank wrapped neat and snug, chest rising in slow, steady breaths. He was awake but still, his head resting between his paws, brown eyes half closed as if guarding a dream he wasn't ready to leave. And on the bed, beneath the soft hum of machines, Samuel slept. No longer the frightened boy from the cellar, but a child finally allowed to rest. Outside, the world had already given it a name: the Pinewood Rescue. Reporters camped at the gates, cameras flashing, officials calling it a miracle. Words like bravery and sacrifice filled the airwaves, medals were mentioned, interviews requested. But inside this room, none of that mattered. The veteran hadn't left his chair in 2 days. He didn't care for glory, only the quiet rise and fall of the boy's chest and the rhythmic breath of the dog at his feet. When Samuel stirred, it was almost imperceptible, a twitch of fingers, a flicker of lashes against his pale skin. The veteran leaned forward. The boy's eyes opened, slow and heavy, and found Max first. The smallest smile touched his lips. He lifted his remaining hand, thin, trembling, still wrapped in gauze, and reached out. Max lifted his head, the sunlight glinting in his eyes, and pressed his muzzle gently against the boy's fingers. No words were needed. The touch said everything: that it was over, that he was safe, that the world could be kind again. The veteran swallowed hard, feeling the lump rise in his throat. He turned away slightly, blinking against the sudden burn behind his eyes. A nurse entered quietly, her steps soft against the linoleum. She was young, her dark hair tied back, her eyes kind but tired. In her hand was a folded piece of paper, creased and written in uneven letters. She smiled gently and handed it to him. "He wrote this when he first woke up," she whispered. The veteran unfolded the note. The handwriting was shaky, the pencil smudged, but the words were clear enough to stop his breath. "Tell the dog he's my hero." He stared at it for a long moment, then once more. The letters blurred as his vision clouded. His hand trembled slightly as he folded the note again, the paper soft from the warmth of his palm. He looked down at Max, at the scars along his coat, at the steady rise of his chest, at the quiet dignity that only animals seem to understand. "You hear that, buddy?" His voice broke halfway through. "That one's for you." Max's tail moved once, slow, deliberate. A single wag that said everything words couldn't. He pressed closer to the bed, head resting against Samuel's arm, eyes closing as the boy's small hand tangled in his fur. The nurse watched from the doorway, her smile trembling, then slipped out without a sound, leaving them in a peace that didn't need witnesses. The sunlight shifted higher, painting the room in gold. Dust motes drifted lazily in the light, turning the air into something sacred. Outside, the pine trees swayed gently, their branches whispering secrets only the wind could carry. The veteran leaned back in his chair, eyes heavy, body weary but heart lighter than it had been in years. The sound of monitors faded into the rhythm of the forest beyond, a lullaby of wind and warmth. For the first time in a long time, he let himself exhale fully, without fear of what came next. Max sighed in his sleep. The boy smiled faintly, and the veteran closed his eyes. The world could have its headlines, its medals, its cameras. None of that mattered here. What mattered was life, fragile, imperfect, but alive. Outside the window, a breeze moved through the pines, gentle and endless, whispering through the needles like an old friend returning home. It carried with it the faintest echo of gratitude, from the boy, from the man, from the forest itself, and for the first time in years, the veteran felt it again. The quiet mercy of redemption. A veteran and his loyal K9, Max, risked everything to save a boy trapped deep in the woods. A rescue that not only saved a life, but also brought both man and dog back from the darkness. Maybe true courage isn't about noise or medals, but about staying when it would have been easier to walk away. Out there, beyond the spotlight, there are still people and dogs who keep their watch in silence. They ask for nothing. They simply protect, love, and believe that kindness still matters. And perhaps that's what this world needs most: quiet loyalty, simple compassion, and the kind of bravery that doesn't need to be seen to be real. If this story touched your heart tonight, I hope you'll stay with us. Subscribe, share these moments, and help keep their spirit alive. May you sleep in peace. May you wake with hope, and may you never forget. Sometimes, the quietest souls carry the loudest courage.